Hello and welcome to Chess Please, and today I wanted to talk about one of my favourite kinds of chess games. And I don't really know if there's a proper name for these kind of games, but I like to call them surviving the siege games. And these are the kinds of games where the opening doesn't necessarily go your way, or actually necessarily doesn't go your way, and you kind of get punched in the mouth and you're on the back foot from the very start. Your king is in the centre, your opponent is ranging down attack, they are banging on the gates, and it's on you to play this really gritty, defensive, batten down the hatches, park the bus, outlast your opponent's attack kind of chess. You're not really thinking about attacking, you're just thinking about survival. And when you're able to do that, when you're able to just hold on and just squeeze, just bend but don't break, and eventually claim the win, that is one of my favourite kinds of chess. And I've two examples here. So we'll jump into the first game and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about here. So this is a game I played recently, a rapid game in the 1800s range, and we're playing a Sicilian. And I don't know what I was thinking at the start. I must have been a little distracted because I commit a pretty cardinal sin of playing the Sicilian, and that is allowing our opponent to step on into d5 like this. Normally you're supposed to trade, or I feel like you're supposed to trade off here first with your c pawn, and they take back with the knight or the queen, and you play from there. But I obviously just got the move order wrong, missed this or whatever, and I let them lodge this in here. And you might think, okay, so what, you can just take back with this pawn. But the whole castle starts to come under a lot of stress when you let them claim this kind of territory. And we'll see this play out here because very, very quickly we get into a lot of distress. So the first thing that happens is our knight comes under fire here. So we have to kind of dance this fella around. He's just kind of getting chased about, and as they do that, they're allowed to get a bit of a better lead in development. And another thing is, having this pawn here means later on I'm going to have trouble blocking a check with this bishop, which will become apparent in a second. When they castle here, for example, if they bring this rook across, normally I would block with this bishop here, or even this bishop here, whatever we might do. But for some reason I just got it in my head that that was going to become a difficult check to block. So again, you're seeing I'm not really at the races in this game, and that is going to lead us to feel a lot of pressure down this e-file. The king, we're just desperately trying to get him castled. So again, kind of overcomplicating things. I wanted to get the knight out here just to block this check, but I don't know why I didn't just do it with the bishop, but c'est la vie. And then more pressure. Our opponent smells blood in the water, and they pile pressure on this knight. The knight is now pinned to the queen and the king, a very uncomfortable position to be in. And suffice to say that immediately there is a threat because we got to keep that bishop there, so we can no longer fianchetto this immediately. So we try to kick this bishop out. The bishop steps in, which again is just, I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was doing. And we are way behind at this stage. Our king can now never castle on the king side, which is where he likes to go. And we're just all out of sorts. They pile on the pressure. As I say, a classic tactical motif for a good strategy is to put pressure on the pinned piece. If you have a piece that is pinned, just see if you can't just heave more and more pressure on them. They do so, and we are just trying to scramble over to this queen side. We're thinking, okay, we'll castle long. We're actually still even on material somehow, but we are way, way behind in any sort of meaningful development. We actually haven't gotten into our opponent's half as yet, whereas they are starting to really put the pressure on down this e-file. And we're just thinking, okay, this is when the mentality of okay, this has gone terribly. What can we do now to just survive? And I'm thinking, okay, well, we need to get our king over yonder. So I'm thinking, just develop your pieces, make a bit of space, castle queen side if you get the chance. If not, just shimmy on over there. And again, I'm not sure what I was thinking. I think I needed some more ballast over here with the knight, or I don't know what I was thinking here. I think maybe I didn't want to get taken here, and then when we capture back, then the queen comes in here. Who knows? But we're just trying to cling on, and this is the worst development. Technically, these pieces are kind of developed. Well, not the bishop. Technically, these pieces are kind of developed, but in the very worst possible way, and in the most claustrophobic way for this king. They bring their knight into the mix again. Our opponent playing well. They're throwing all the right punches. They're putting pressure in here, which would be checkmate, because there's nothing to take the knight and there's nowhere for the king to go. So it's a pretty scary one. We make a bit of space for our king, the tiniest little crumb of room, and we do put a bit of pressure on this knight. So happy days. They jump the knight back there as well. that's the first like let up. That's the first kind of sign of maybe not, piling on the pressure. I don't know what they could have done, but that was the first sort of retreating move. And now we're thinking, okay, now we have a little glimmer of hope to maybe potentially castle queenside. So we'll see what happens here. They trade off there as well, and that's another thing when you are attacking. It's a fine balance to strike. Sometimes you want to trade off a good defensive piece of your opponent, particularly when you have more pieces in the attack. Sometimes by trading off, you're sort of bringing about the end of your attack. And sometimes if you get the calculation wrong, if you get the level of pressure wrong, that kind of trade-off, you're bringing about the end of your attack, but you're not bringing about checkmate, you're not bringing about any significant material gain. You're actually just ending your attack early. So you don't necessarily want to be in a hurry to trade off without any clear reason. Another sort of byproduct of this, which will become important, is this now opens up the rook. Like, the rook would not want to be anywhere else in the world right now. So I thought that was a little bit misplayed by our opponent, and that is the first like glimmer that we might be able to not get completely wiped off the board in this game. They bring the rook in again, kind of a nothing move. They're just staring at their own pawn. It's, in theory, it makes sense. I was like, okay, yeah, well, we're bringing another piece to the party. What could go wrong? Maybe you're queuing up something along with the bishop on this side, but it doesn't quite focus on the matter at hand, which is this knight. So we are able to castle queenside, which is a huge relief. Okay, because now all that pressure they've built up, I would say the siege is like starting to run out of a bit of steam. So they capture our knight, and it does look like they've won a piece there because they have 2 defenders on this and we only have 2 defenders on that. So it looks like they've just gotten away with a free piece there. But we are able to pin this bishop to the queen here with our rook. So eventually we are able to actually recoup that bishop. And again, just break away even. And we're not so much under siege now. Now we're thinking, okay, well, what can we do? And I'm thinking, all right, well, they've laid this bed for them to lie in with this beautiful rook here on G8 staring here on at the king. So I'm thinking, okay, how can I open up maybe our queen to get over there, maybe our other rook to get over there? Firstly, I want to get this king out of trouble and defend this a pawn. Don't want the queen coming in here. That would be an absolute disaster. So we do that. And they move their pawn. I think they're just trying to prepare a pawn storm perhaps, or some maybe even prepare the knight or the queen to come in here. The bishop to come in there with a bit of defense, and that's fine. We will let them do so. We're just clearing the way. We want our queen over here. We want to start counterattacking now that we have survived the worst of the siege. They do bring their bishop in here. We could have probably just taken this bishop, but we didn't bother. We said, okay, I'm going to threaten checkmate instead. Not a bad move. Taking was probably the best move according to the computer, but the computer is a nerd, so don't worry about that. Now we take the bishop, and that's all fine. That's one less piece that they have in the attack. There is the threat of this, but we're actually threatening a little bit more now. We are the ones that are turning the screw. We capture it with this pawn, and we capture the knight. So again, we are actually now finally up material. Their attack has completely fizzled out, but they do still have their heavy pieces. They do still have some open files, so we don't want to fall asleep at the wheel here. And they do start to think, okay, this could be a very dangerous attack here, very hard to stop. But they're just a little late because of a beautiful little brilliancy we play here. We take with the rook here. This is a classic chess.com tactic. Take with the rook, that's check. We take with the queen, king steps off. We check again with the queen. Then we bring the rook on over, and our opponent resigns in here because the king is in real trouble. They could either go here or wherever they go. We're going to be able to checkmate them, ladder mate with the queen and the rook there. So that is the first kind of surviving the siege. And that is, again, if we look at this early stage where we just get absolutely hemmed into a corner, like at this stage, I'm thinking, okay, this is really, actually maybe in this stage here, I'm like, okay, this is really, really grim. We got everything pinned down at our very, very claustrophobic king here in the middle. And then again, they just trade off a few pieces ill-advisedly. We do get our king out of the mix, and we're able to cling on for the win. Which brings us to my other kind of survive the siege game, which happens in a very similar fashion, where we do sort of fall a little bit shy of the mark. We don't fall for that same trick where we let them march on in, but we do fall for similar tricks where we just sort of, we don't handle an advanced pawn that well. We try to go for the cheap sort of the quick fix solution where you attack it with this f pawn, But our king isn't castled, it's nowhere near castling. So we do kind of fall foul of the trappings of moving your F pawn too soon. That pawn in particular stops this diagonal from being a problem, and that diagonal will very often be a problem. Even right now it is a problem, because if the queen comes in here, you might think that we can block with the pawn, but we can't, because the knight would take, and if you take back, the queen takes the rook. So that's something that we need to react to. At the very same time, we need to react to this knight being double attacked, and not only double attacked, if they take with the knight here, that knight would attack our queen, and if we take back, then that bishop would take with check and attack our rook. So we are immediately, it's happened again. We are under the cosh. The siege has begun. We have not played this opening well, and we are paying for it. This I thought was a nice little elegant solution to some of those problems. It defends the knight again, and now if the queen does come out here, you can play this pawn, because if the knight takes, that's one less attacker on this knight. You can capture back with the knight, and you're not doing too badly. So I thought that was a nice move in unlucky circumstance. But then this was also a nice move from our opponent, because they're threatening checkmate immediately, and our king does not have a lot of squares to go to, because the knight is blocking this and this. So immediately a huge amount of pressure coming in here. So this is move 8, and we are already like fending off checkmate. They're struggling to fend off checkmate threats. So we just move our queen out of here. Again, defends the knight, gives the king one square to go to. So it's not too bad. We move our bishop here, thinking again we might try to castle long. We worked pretty well for us the last time. Our opponent puts a quick end to that by delivering this check and piling on the pressure. So we step aside. We're never going to castle, but that's not the worst, because unlike the previous game, this siege is all about speed. This siege was about getting these 3 pieces into the mix as quickly as possible. It wasn't about the previous game where they were like piling on the pressure with every piece they had. This was about getting at our king before we can get set. And they make a very similar mistake to our opponent, where they start trading off stuff. They start bringing their own attack to an end, which we are very happy to see. We will get that knight out of there. We'll put more pressure on this knight. A little bit more squares around the king, which again you might say, well, that's actually just fodder for them to come in and attack. But squares around the king is a nice thing to not get checkmated in these kind of close quarter situations. So a bit of air for the king to breathe, a bit of luft as it were. They do bring another piece in here, but we shift across here, and amazingly everything is a little bit safe and sound, because queen can't come in here, can't come in here, like there's no good. It's all weirdly hanging together. This is defended twice. It's just, as I say, it's that bend don't break kind of mentality, where everything looks really, really dangerous and really like you're going to lose. The siege is piling on thick, but you just get away with it. And again, they trade off a piece. Sometimes when you are attacking, it can feel like that. It can feel like you want to make things happen. You want to take defenders away. But you really want to have a pretty clear plan of why you are trading off, why you're getting rid of an attacker. Particularly when you're not up material or anything like that. Because all it really does is fizzle out your attack, unless you have, a clear benefit, a clear next step. And in this case, it's disastrous, because not only is it taking away one of their attackers, it gives our king an absolute haven over here. This is miles away from anything our opponent is doing. And we don't need to action that anytime soon. But we will to connect our rooks like this as well. So we kind of went for a quick fire one there. They traded off here. I think, listen, let's get our bishop developed. I feel like the siege has abated. We can start to think about how we're going to attack. And yes, we'll give up this pawn, but we'll get a pawn back in exchange. And I would much prefer, again, that open g-file on a castled king. Who says no? So we connect our rooks, we get our king out of trouble. This is a kind of a cheap enough attack with the pawn. So we drop back and we get a nice little battery going with the queen and the bishop, which will become important. Queen steps back, and again, their attack is just slowly fizzling. We bring our other rook into the mix. We get this pawn. We keep this pawn defended, and we get ready to start to charge up the g-file here. They do like a nice little sort of pawn phalanx thing here to try to defend themselves. So we need to knock on the gate even harder. We just kind of keep pushing back here. We're saying, okay, you're no longer the one attacking. We're calling the shots here a little bit. They move their queen out of the way. We push their bishop out of the way. This pawn move, I'm not really sure what we were thinking. a little bit of a step off the gas from ourselves, and it allows them to get another piece into the mix. We might have done a little better there, but we did get a nice safe square for our rook to push the queen out of there. We double our rooks, and now even though they do have this pretty well defended, we do have a lot of weight coming their way. The rook defends itself, so we don't need to worry about that, and now we do have an untenable amount of pressure on that pawn on g3, which we are eventually going to tell. So we capture there once, capture there twice. Nice, another rook sacrifice here on the g file. That's not an element of Survive the Siege games, it just happened to happen in both of my Survive the Siege games, where they capture here. This one I got a little bit giddy because I thought we had a really lovely checkmate going on here. When we moved our queen across here, I thought the king was going to come on in here, and we would capture here, and then the queen would have to take. When we take back the bishop, we'd win the queen. But we've also given away a heck of a lot of material. We're down a rook already. So that was a little bit giddy. I think actually taking here immediately puts a bit of pressure on the queen. Maybe the queen takes back, and you still have the option of threatening for checkmate a lot quicker, actually. So doing the rook first would have been better there. We didn't do that. And it gets a little messy, and I won't dwell too much on the end of the game. We do win, and we're able to put the king on the back foot and launch our own attack. We take the rook there, we're up in exchange, happy days, but we've already given a rook away, so we are now down in exchange. We're only down in exchange, but we win the queen here with our queen, or with our bishop pinning to the king. So we take there, and again we make a little bit of a meal out of this. I'm sure there was quicker mates, but we have a queen and a rook against a rook, bishop and knight, and our opponent is in crazy time trouble, which is how the game is actually ultimately decided, which is a bit of an anticlimax, but I don't really mind, because we did that Survive the Siege. We dug on in versus a very, very tricky, very smash mouth attack, and I don't know why I get such a kick out of these. It's kind of like in the Two Towers, the Lord of the Rings movie, when Gandalf appears at Helm's Deep on the morning of the 5th day, and it just like brings the light. It just turns the fight around when you think things are really desperate, you think things are, your backs are really against the wall, and you just are able to hang on just long enough for the tide to turn. Very, very satisfying. I hope you get to enjoy a game like this as well. Let me know what your kind of favorite type of game of chess is, in this sort of like narrative focus. I do love a chess game with a narrative, like you can cook up a narrative around it, whether that is like close to reality or not. It doesn't really matter. That's what a narrative's all about. You can just tell it to yourself. That is going to be all from me today, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. Feel free to subscribe and stick around for more chess content, and as always, enjoy your chess.